Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener-supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast. Coming up in just a moment, we will be continuing our political coverage. That includes our interview with former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. He will be talking with me about his campaign as a Libertarian now for the U.S. Senate. And of course, Election Day, if you haven't heard, and I hope you have, is tomorrow. We'll be covering all the contested races that are meaningful to San Juan County. You can follow our election night coverage tomorrow night on our social media platforms. That includes Facebook and Twitter. Also coming up this hour at 8:30 this morning, Dr. Ariel Liese will be my guest. We are talking again about mental health this morning, and Dr. Liese has proposed and presented some radio features to local radio stations in the community about mental health issues and mental health services that are available. We'll be talking with her about those radio programs and also about adding them to our lineup here at KSJE. That's coming up this morning at 8:30, my conversation with Dr. Ariel Liese. Continuing our political coverage with the candidates running in the November election, we are joined now by candidate for U.S. Senate, Libertarian candidate Gary Johnson from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Mr. Johnson, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Scott, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
You bet. It's great to catch up with you and visit. You're in the final weeks of the campaign, and so tell us how things are going.
Well, first of all, being in the campaign in the first place came as a complete surprise to me. I had just finished the Continental Divide mountain bike race for the second year in a row, and Aubrey Dunn came to me the second week in July and said that he was looking at dropping out of the race, and he'd done some polling, and which suggested that I might actually win if I entered the race. And so he wanted to drop out, and he wanted me to take his place, and we looked at it very closely. What's at stake is arguably being the swing vote in the U.S. Senate, and being able to run a 3-month campaign for U.S. Senate. So kind of a gift on the time frame here, but potentially being the next U.S. Senator from New Mexico and potentially being the swing vote in the U.S. Senate. So big stakes. Right, and that is quite the job to accomplish, doing a major campaign, statewide campaign, in just 3 short months. You've been really making your way around the state since that all started, correct? Well, I have, and I am optimistic. Of course, you know, we just got how many days now? 12 days till the election? Not many days to go, so we'll see what happens. We will indeed. And Mr. Johnson, I know you've got a lot of name recognition, of course, as a former governor, but running as a third party. Now, the Libertarian Party has certainly gotten more well-known, I think, around the state, but do you find yourself still having to explain some of the platforms of the Libertarian Party? Well, more than anything, I'm an independent. Yeah, I'm running as a Libertarian, and my philosophy is closer to being a Libertarian than certainly it is being a Republican or a Democrat. But I think all of us are independent. 55% of voters that are registering to vote in New Mexico, and this isn't just New Mexico, it's nationwide, are registering as independent. And right now, the two-party system isn't working. This is an opportunity to really show the country and the world that there is another option. If I'm the swing vote in the U.S. Senate, I'd like to be on the Senate Budget Committee. I think the biggest issue facing this country right now is the deficit and the debt. My pledge, I will submit a balanced budget to Congress. My pledge is I will uphold the United States Constitution. If I have one message here, it's that young people are getting screwed when it comes to the long term. Short term, we're borrowing $1 trillion this year to add to our $21 trillion debt. This is unbelievably unfair to young people in this country.
And it sounds like you feel that there's a big bubble that's about to burst or will be bursting, and it'll be the young people's job to clean up the mess. Is that kind of where we're going?
That's exactly where it's going. If running up debt and deficit were the key to success, Zimbabwe would be the center of the world, followed by Venezuela. This doesn't work. At some point, it will implode. And I hate to be right about this, Scott, but I'm going to be right about this. We need to fix it, and we need to fix it now. And to balance the federal budget, that means reforming Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and reducing military spending.
Well, and that was going to be my next question to you, Mr. Johnson, would be where do you cut the budget to try to do a balanced budget? A lot of folks have their pet projects and pet programs and things like that, and to slash so much, I mean, can it be done? What about defense spending and some of the other spending we hear about?
Well, in the case of New Mexico, we're unique in New Mexico. When I was governor of New Mexico, there was the BRAC Commission, the Base Realignment and Closure Commission, which was, we were slated to lose military assets in New Mexico. Out of that process, we actually gained military assets because the military came to grips with the fact that military equipment doesn't rust in New Mexico. We have the ground space to conduct any maneuvers that the military might want to do, and we have more restricted airspace than any of the lower 48. We have the only supersonic corridor in the lower 48. I would make the same case. So dollars efficiently spent. When you tighten your belt, you look to spend the money that you do spend most efficiently. I'm going to make the case, and justifiably so, that military dollars spent in New Mexico are the most efficient dollars spent. I'd make the same case when it comes to the labs. Why build new infrastructure in other parts of the country when the infrastructure exists here in New Mexico? It's an argument unique to New Mexico. I don't think any other state could make that argument.
Right, and so it sounds like you're saying that defense spending would be on the table just like everything else in trying to pass a balanced budget?
Well, yes, definitely defense. And I don't want to call it defense spending, it's military spending. We've gone way beyond the Constitution when it comes to defense. Defense is the United States Constitution defending us against foreign aggression. I'm going to argue that being the world's policeman is not defending us against foreign aggression. It's being the world policeman and using Afghanistan as an example. The Soviet Union was bankrupted because of Afghanistan, right? And we're immune from that? Let's get out of Afghanistan tomorrow. And for all of the negative consequence of getting out of Afghanistan tomorrow, those same negative consequences will exist 40 years from now, if that's when we finally decide to get out.
Right. Understood. Let me ask you a bit about immigration. That is in the news last week as we're talking, and probably will still be in the news again as we lead up to Election Day. What are your thoughts on the immigration problem, the refugee problem that we're seeing across Central America?
Well, first of all, we should embrace immigration. We're a country of immigrants. Immigrants come here, they work hard, they become taxpayers, they're law-abiding citizens, overwhelmingly. So let's make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card that applicable taxes get paid. Let's not build a wall across the border. If we build a wall across the border, at some point in this country's future, we'll be taking down that wall for what it represents. Now, that's not the same as border security. Look, border security exists. I'm not suggesting it should be any different than what it is today. We don't want truckloads of drugs coming across the border. We don't want truckloads of convicts coming across the border. That's not happening, and it's not happening because of border security. That would be maintained, but don't build a wall. And Mexican citizens will stand in line if the line is moving to get a work visa, something that currently doesn't exist. You can't get a work visa, hence the illegal immigration issue in the first place.
There's no path to citizenship, I would say, for many, many folks, unless they're willing to wait a decade or more.
And citizenship, pathway to citizenship needs to exist in conjunction with being able to get a work visa. This is what this country has been built on.
I'm speaking with former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. He is a Libertarian running for the U.S. Senate in the election in November. So, Mr. Johnson, you're up against an incumbent and a Republican. Some of the polling shows the race maybe getting a little tighter than it has been in recent weeks. Are you encouraged by those numbers?
Yeah, and we'll see. Entering the race really late, as I did, completely unexpected, to be in contention going into Election Day, it's kind of cool. New Mexico has a chance here to really make a statement nationwide. The two-party system is not working. If I were to get elected, there would be thousands of candidates running nationwide that would not have run otherwise. So this is a way at saying the two-party system is not working, and I'd like for everybody to recognize the biggest threat that is facing this country, and it is the deficit and the debt. Right now, our national debt is $21 trillion. When interest rates go up 1%, 100 basis points, that's $210 billion for interest only on the debt. This year, interest only on the debt is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of $480 billion. Medicaid is about $550 billion. Medicare is about $550 billion. I'm just trying to put this into context. And in 5 years, if we're running at a $1 trillion a year deficit, which is projected to happen, coupled with rising interest rates, in 5 years, we could well be spending $1 trillion a year on interest only on the debt. This is young people. This is a burden that's going to fall on young people, and nothing could be as unfair as what I have just described.
Indeed. And so with that being said, Mr. Johnson, if you get to the U.S. Senate, how do you propose to convince your fellow senators and the other two parties about the looming problem?
Well, somebody needs to be up there and actually have this voice. I pledge to be that voice. I hope to be on the Senate Budget Committee, and I would submit a balanced budget to Congress. Scott, as governor, I had an open door after 4 policy where I saw anybody in the state of New Mexico the third Thursday of every month. I knew more about what was happening in New Mexico than anybody else because of the open door after 4 policy. As U.S. Senator, I will have an open door after 4 policy in New Mexico as a U.S. Senator, but I will also have an open door after 4 policy in Washington, D.C., for waste, fraud, and abuse to bring attention to the budget and to the deficit and to how waste, fraud, and abuse does play a role in all this. And I have to tell you, I think that would be terribly entertaining nationally. Where's the senator from, what's the senators from New Mexico's Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Award for the month? I have to think it might be a topic of conversation on Sunday morning, on the Sunday morning talk shows.
It could very well be. There doesn't seem to be a shortage of some of those notices coming out of the nation's capital and from government. I would agree with you there. Let me ask you a bit about Northwest New Mexico, Mr. Johnson. You were just here a few days ago. It's a very dependent on the energy industry. We've seen a lot of ups and downs with oil and gas. Is there federal policy or anything that can be done to either help the existing industries that are here or help the area that's trying to start diversifying the economy into maybe some other areas like outdoor recreation?
Well, outdoor recreation, that's what I love. But looking at oil and gas, look, gas is really, oil and gas both, important, the most important elements to our state economy. I was made aware, having gone there, that looking at railroad access to be able to ship out oil and gas, which, as a U.S. Senator, I would certainly not be an impediment when it comes to that. And looking at the future when it comes to energy, renewable energy, really exciting. 2040, 2050, projected to be perhaps 50% of the grid. Well, where's the other 50%? Well, that's going to be natural gas, because natural gas is cheaper than coal. Coal has been bankrupted. That's a good thing because we want clean air. And the trajectory of coal right now is like so. It's just a fact. When coal plants wear out, they're not going to be replaced with new coal plants. They're going to be replaced by natural gas. And of course, Northwest New Mexico plays a huge role in this having happened and the future of energy in this country.
Okay, good to hear you say that. But of course, we have a couple of coal-fired power plants that support a lot of jobs and has a lot of economic impact here. And folks get very nervous when people start talking about the future of those plants being only 2 years long or less.
Well, and that's a reality. It's just, we do face realities. This is the free market at work. The free market, you and I, we don't want a layer of coal on the ground every morning. And when those plants in Northwest New Mexico wear out, they're not going to be replaced by coal. They're going to be replaced by natural gas. And this is a nationwide, worldwide phenomenon. This is just not Northwest New Mexico. Marginal coal has been bankrupted. It's been bankrupted because of fracking and the abundance of natural gas and the low price of natural gas. The only way that coal stays alive is to subsidize coal. And it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Understood. Mr. Johnson, we are almost out of time. Before we let you go on to your next appointment, let us know if folks want more information about your campaign. I imagine they can find you on all the social medias and on the internet and find out more details.
You got it. Search engine Gary Johnson. It'll all pop up. And having been governor for 8 years, I hope that I am remembered for having been honest to a fault, been accountable for everything that I've done, been respectful in the process, and actually got a lot of stuff done. And, one of those items was four-laning the highway from Albuquerque to Farmington. I thought it was really important for the state economy, and I think it's worked out that way. But that's just one example of politics last on the agenda and issues first. In my administration, I think we accomplished a lot.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think a lot of folks do remember that project on the highway, and a lot of folks thought it couldn't be done. It was too expensive, but you and your cabinet figured out a way to do it.
We did, and that project was the first of what has become hundreds of federal projects modeled after us doing it as the first. We were the first to do it. Design, build, guarantee, finance that highway project using future federal highway funds. We did it first, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of other highway projects using the template that we established to do that.
Very good. Thank you for the reminder once again, Gary Johnson, and thank you for your time talking with me today. Appreciate it very much.
Very much. Thank you. And to everybody, get out and vote. Hey, if you vote, you can't complain. If you don't vote, you can't complain.
Very good point. I agree with you. Thank you very much, Gary Johnson, my guest from Albuquerque here on KSJE. Back with more in just a moment. This program is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, who's expanding its services to offer low-cost blood screenings all year round, now offering walk-in convenience to get the blood tests you want when you want them. MyLabs, patient-ordered testing, is available in Farmington at the hospital's laboratory and the Outpatient Diagnostic Center on 30th Street. Also in Aztec at San Juan Health Partners Family Medicine at 120 Llanos Street. With nearly 20 tests available, there's an option for everyone. MyLabs, patient-ordered testing, a wellness service of San Juan Regional Medical Center. Joining me here in our visual radio studio, Dr. Ariel Liese is with me. She is a mental health consultant. Dr. Liese, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Scott. Good morning.
Good to have you here. And the reason I wanted to bring you on the program was to talk a little bit about a new feature that will be airing on the radio station that you have produced called Mental Health Minutes. And from your work as a mental health counselor, tell us a little bit about these.
Well, I'm only a consultant. I'm not an actual licensed counselor. But the mental health minutes, I decided to do them, of course, after I finished my PhD. And it is a specialization in mental health and with at-risk populations. And just the prevalence of mental health issues that not only the nation is facing, but we as a county are facing. And there are a lot of issues that I think that the common person may not know, like the prevalence of internalizing behaviors or behaviors like depression, anxiety, antisocial withdrawal behavior that is occurring in younger children every year in preschool children.
And that's nationwide, and especially
nationwide.
But we have the problem here as well.
Well, yes, definitely mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm speaking of the preschool population, and all of a sudden the increase in depression, anxiety, that is nationwide.
Sure.
And the issue is escalating. The book, and it's actually, I'm working on a book right now that focuses on that topic, and how parents, educators, and just stakeholders in general can target the issue and get to it before it rolls into adolescence.
Right.
Where it becomes more of a problem.
Sure.
So,
And it seems to me that it's not something that's talked about very often. Maybe it is more so these days than it maybe was 20 years ago. It seems like mental health issues are becoming more accepted in society, because for a while it seems like it was just kind of brushed aside. Is that a misstatement, or would you agree with some of that?
I would agree with some of it, but stigma is also a huge issue.
Still.
Yes, and I don't know if it ever will not be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for some reason, you know, when you talk about, you know, if someone says, oh, you know, I've been diagnosed with cancer, but on the flip side, if someone says, oh, I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, there's just something where you're like, oh, for me, something with inside of you that suddenly shifts.
Right.
And I don't necessarily know what that is.
Sure. And we should react to that news the same way we would react to someone who says they have a diagnosis of cancer or a broken arm or a broken leg.
Yeah.
If they have a mental health issue.
Yeah, definitely. It's just an issue of the mind. You know, and I have my own opinions about whether some diagnoses is in the DSM, which is the mental handbook,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're actual conditions or not.
I see. But you mentioned earlier that you're seeing mental health issues with younger and younger people these
yes.
days. Preschool.
Yes, preschool. Depression, withdrawal behaviors, isolation, severe anxiety, also anger, which is stemming from a lot, and I do agree with this, with media violence. The amount of violence that young children are allowed to see, and then that doesn't give them self-regulation skills.
Right. If they're exposed to it without any interpretation from like a parent or an adult, that's really the issue, isn't it?
That's the issue. They don't know how to manage their anger. They don't know how to manage whatever they're feeling, whether it's vulnerability, low self-esteem. It just erupts. Sure.
And I guess if I'm a young child and I see these violent images on TV or in a video game or what have you, and I don't have an adult there saying, well, that's not normal, that's a specific situation that caused this person to be so angry or so violent or so whatever, then I think that's the way adults react to things. And where I could react to it too, I suppose. If it's on TV, why not?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it definitely skews and desensitizes, if I can say that word.
Right.
The child.
Sure.
It doesn't make them empathetic to what others are feeling. It just really, to me, it builds up a barrier for them.
And this is happening at younger and younger ages that you're seeing. It seems
definitely. Another thing too, Scott, and I had mentioned this to you, is I think that the common person is not aware how dangerous and the number one psychiatric illness that is killing young people is eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, and two main causes are cardiac arrest or death by suicide. And I don't think the average person realizes that.
True, and I think we hear a lot about suicides in our community especially, and it just seems to me, I mean, one is too many, but it seems like our communities have had more than one.
Yeah.
And it's tragic and unfortunate, and we often don't know maybe the causes behind that, at least those of us not directly related to the victim and the surviving family and things like that, but it may be from some of these issues that you're talking about, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And, mental health, it's such a complicated and complex domain. I mean, there's so many things. It's peeling back an onion when a person exhibits a behavior. There's always a core reason behind a behavior.
Right.
When you peel it back, like when we were discussing anger. Anger is a secondary emotion. There's usually something behind that anger. People erupt because, it's not, they're angry because they got their feelings hurt, or they're angry because they feel vulnerable, or they're angry, for a variety of reasons.
Right.
And you just have to peel it back and, and ultimately learn coping skills, whether that's cognitive behavioral coping skills. There's also, mindfulness, a DBT, different, and that's kind of like a newer therapy that's out, and
right.
Just different.
And so what can we do, maybe as friends or parents or siblings of someone who may be going through some of this? Because mental health problems affect anybody, not just the very young, not just the very old. I mean, it really doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point.
How can we be helpful? How can we look? Can we look for warning signs, or what can we? I guess having a conversation is maybe the first step if you have a concern about somebody.
Definitely, with the anniversary of the Aztec shooting coming up, it's a good point. What can we do? Watch for signs, watch for warning signs, and never just, oh, that's just him or that's just her being the way they are. Don't brush it off. Take every little instance seriously. That's how I look at it. And if especially a child, if they start to pull back and start to isolate more and more into their room, or into electronics, for me that's a big red flag.
Sure. But sometimes those characteristics sound just like a typical teenager, I guess, of being a little more in their room, a little more isolated, a little more moody. So it's kind of hard to differentiate sometimes, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that's another good point. I think too, it can be a culmination of different things.
Right.
Considering the fact that a teen is being a teen, but if you know the teenager and you start to see things are off, like, usually they have a large appetite and suddenly their appetite just dwindles to nothing. Usually they have friends over. Suddenly they have no friends over. They've shown a lack of interest in things that normally just brought them a lot of joy.
That's the key, I guess, is if mom or dad or whoever the adult is connected to that teen, that kid's life, they know when something's a little off. Not just the typical teen angst or whatever it is, but if they're really connected to that young person, then they can tell, hopefully, when there's something a little bit off from normal.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
And two, mental health, it is everybody's business. It's because it affects so many people, as unfortunately as we've seen in public violence with it, and it's also, it affects so many other different aspects of our life. I mean, honestly, if you do not have your mental health, you really don't have a lot.
True.
You
I imagine it can cause other issues if you are suffering from a mental health condition, a mental health illness. And so with these segments, which is why you're here this morning, because we're going to start airing them on KSJE, these 1 minute little bits of advice, what do you hope people will glean from them? Just a reminder that this is an issue and that they may be in contact with people who are suffering?
Yeah, definitely. Well, basically the layout of the minute is I give you a topic, like, for instance, we had talked about eating disorders.
Right.
Where they give you warning signs, it can give you explanations of them. It can give you also just quick tips on how to handle it. And at the end of it, I list my cell number where you can text me. And I will, if whoever calls, I'm not in practice right now, so basically what I do is I will just give you a community resource.
Got it.
Direct you to a resource or something where you can get help for the issue.
And that's, I think, a great gift and a great thing to be able to have available for folks and to be able to refer, because I think a lot of folks sometimes think that we don't have a lot of resources in our community because maybe we're smaller than others, but we do.
Yeah, we do, and it's completely confidential. I won't ask for a lot of information. Just how can I help you? Where can we get you some help?
Right.
We have a lot of excellent trained professionals in this community.
That's important to know.
It is.
And we hear, it seems, nationwide about the problems of getting folks treatment for mental health issues. And it seems like that comes up when we hear about a violent situation in the news or what have you. There's always the question about, well, do we have enough mental health? Why didn't that person get the help that they needed, or things along that after a tragedy has happened, unfortunately, many, many times. And so I guess with this radio feature, and it's not just airing on our station, you've got it on other stations too, to your credit. And so I think, no matter where folks are listening, the idea hopefully is that they will hear these and again be reminded that these services are available in our community, and to reach out or direct their loved one, their friend, their acquaintance, whoever it might be, to these resources.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, something as small as this where you get a loved one in for some little counseling, it can change the trajectory of their life, and we need to never discount that. And I think that when we do that, we're just doing them a disservice, and it's just a way to be helpful and supportive.
Very true. And again, these mental health issues, you mentioned the anniversary that's coming up a little over, almost a month away from Aztec, and some people who may have thought that they had moved on, even though it's hard to move on from something that tragic, and I think we'll always remember the incident and certainly the folks whose lives were lost that day. But folks who maybe thought that they had put that behind them and they are moving on, but maybe an anniversary could trigger those feelings again, those very emotional feelings of what they went through on that day.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Anniversaries are huge triggers. The holiday season itself is stressful.
Right.
I mean, it can test our resilience at any level, and definitely, just take a step, and even if you need to see someone for a session or two, just to vent and kind of get a perspective on things, that's always helpful.
Right.
Too.
And again, those resources are available.
They are.
In our community.
Well, within the community, unfortunately, they're not, depending on the issue. Once again, I'll go back to eating disorders. There are not a lot of trained professionals in San Juan County for how to specifically deal with intense issues like anorexia or bulimia.
Okay.
Usually you'll have to go to Durango. Durango has some good resources, Albuquerque, but they are available. You just have to know where they're at. Right.
And at least getting that conversation started, right, to get that referral, to find out how far away they are, if they're not in town, but maybe they're only an hour away or what have you. I mean, I think it's a good first step for folks. And so with these, you hope to provide a new one every week, or you've got a whole stable of them ready to go?
Yeah, I do. I have a library and building, and different topics from, eating disorders, depression, PTSD, how to think positively, seasonal affective disorder, just a lot of really interesting things that you'll say, wow, I never thought of that.
Right. Well, and again, I think it's a brilliant idea, and thank you for taking the initiative to get them out to our community, and again throughout the other stations as well. And this is somewhat of a personal issue, I think, for a lot of folks, and so I think sometimes listening to the radio, in the car or whatever, may get folks thinking about, maybe I should make a call, or maybe I should see what that is if I'm feeling depression can be a mental health issue, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about a personal issue. There are a lot of people who are in recovery from, trying to stay clean, sober, or just trying to kick a habit.
Sure.
I have a segment on recovery. I am in recovery too, and it is hard, and it leads to, just like you said, different issues: depression, anxiety, triggers, all these different things. And in recovery, you have to take it a day at a time. Well, with any mental health issue, most of the time you have to take it one day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. From minute to minute.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Well, Dr. Liese, thank you so much for coming in this morning and talking about this very important topic. And again, we're looking forward to airing your segments. They'll be aired throughout the day on the radio here, and we'll look forward to the new ones that you have coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Dr. Ariel Liese, my guest here on KSJE. Back with more in just a moment.
In the 1700s, the United States broke from Great Britain. No colony in history had ever successfully done that. This series examines America's revolution.
A Moment in Time with Dan Roberts.
Though it was preceded and followed by more consequential revenue acts originating in the British Parliament, the Stamp Act was perhaps the most significant of these measures because of the reaction it provoked in the North American colonies. Beginning with the Patrick Henry-authored Virginia Resolves in late spring 1765, resistance and revulsion, sometimes quite violent, particularly in Massachusetts, spread outward from the Commonwealth of Virginia. This antagonism demonstrated for the first time a unity of common oppositional spirit among the colonies to this obvious violation of one of the premier foundations of the British Constitution, namely, that no one should be taxed unless represented in the taxing body, hence no taxation without representation, and America was clearly not represented in Parliament. The flame of opposition began to spread, and Parliament was faced with open revolt in the colonies against its constitutional power to tax. America was quickly falling out of control, and soon cries for repeal began to echo through the halls of Westminster, eventually becoming irresistible. What made repeal possible was a change in government. Next time, the price of a tax too high. At the University of Richmond School of Professional and Continuing Studies, I'm Dan Roberts.
Funding for A Moment in Time with Dan Roberts is provided in part by the Petersburg Preservation Task Force, highlighting Blandford Church, home of 15 Tiffany windows. Online at petersburgpreservationtaskforce.com. Our theme music is composed by B.J. Liederman. Our sound engineer is Robert Richards. This program is produced at the University of Richmond in cooperation with WCVE Public Radio. Transcripts, podcast, audio, and video are available at amomentintime.com.
Make each day a learning experience with the Academic Minute and join us as we discover cutting-edge research from colleges and universities around the world. Tune in to broaden your understanding of the past and be the first to learn how today's innovations will transform our tomorrow. From the latest breakthrough in green technology to the discovery of humanity's oldest tools, you'll find it all on the Academic Minute.
Listen every weekday afternoon during the KSJE Evening News at 5:30. (8:55) Monday morning on KSJE 90.9 FM. It's time for our Monday Reboot segment. Lewis Campbell is joining me from Synergy Computer Systems in Farmington. Lewis is on the phone with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being with us. And on this day before Election Day, you tell me about some kind of concerning news about voting machines, right?
Well, yes and no. So
okay.
In Virginia and Kentucky now, ProPublica hooked up with some people who, there's people that go out there regularly and look at public internet addresses, IP addresses, and they do scans of those addresses to kind of see, well, are there any vulnerabilities on these public websites or public, systems.
Right.
And so they found some public IPs that were connected to voter registration networks, you could say.
I see.
And they found that on some of these voter registration networks, there were internet protocol ports available that are connected to what's called FTP, file transfer protocols. It's basically a file sharing service. So they raised the alarm because this is not a very secure service. And on one of these, I believe it's in Wisconsin. This involved Wisconsin and Kentucky, but I think the Wisconsin one in particular had one of these file sharing services on their public-facing voter registration service that did not even have a password connected to it.
Oh.
Which is actually pretty typical of FTP. You can set FTP up to be connected to anonymously.
Okay.
So this is a concern.
Right.
Internet, security experts say that now, FTP is a pretty common service that a lot of servers use and people set up to transfer files with. You've probably used it yourself without even realizing it. When you go to a website and you click download, a lot of times it's FTP behind the scenes that's letting you do the download.
Sure.
But security experts now are saying this is old technology. We shouldn't be using this anymore. There's something called, secure FTP. That's a better way of doing it because it encrypts the connection and so forth. And this is all true. Now, to play devil's advocate and be on the side of the election officials, they've responded in these two instances in Kentucky and Wisconsin by saying, well, hang on, now wait a sec. Now, it may be true that we have FTP on these sites, but in the case of the one with the no password, that public-facing web port actually connected to a computer that had nothing to do with any voter information, even though it was available. It looked like it was available from the public. It was connected to a computer that it wasn't connected to anything, and there was no information on it.
Right.
And then a lot of these other people are saying, well, yes, we may have FTP on some of these things, but they're behind firewalls that block and control and so forth. So there's back and forth, but it is a concern, and it's a concern that in a real secure network, security people try to turn off all these services, especially old ones, especially if they're not using them. And what this tells us is that on these voter registration networks, we probably have IT and security people that either are not, qualified enough, or probably just overworked and underpaid enough, don't have enough staffing to be able to go through all these systems and turn off the things that they don't need to have, to shut these services down that they don't need to have. And that's as big a security problem as a lot of other things, because that's pretty commonly what causes security issues, is you just don't have the money, time, and staff to be able to do the due diligence to shut these things down.
Interesting. Until there's a problem, I suppose, and then everybody wants to have it fixed yesterday, especially with Election Day coming up. But as you mentioned so it's not, and pardon me for misstating it, not voter machines, but websites and these things that are being stored at a state level or a local level in some other states that was the problem.
Yes.
Got it.
But that doesn't mean we don't have it in New Mexico. That doesn't mean, we don't know. It's quite possible that other states have the same problem. They may or may not be able to be crossing all the T's and dots. There's a lot of T's and to cross, a lot of I's to dot to make sure that you have everything perfectly secure. That's the thing.
That's true. And you know that because you do a lot of this work for your clients and things like that. So you certainly know just how difficult it can be to make sure all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted on a website or a big organization like a state or even a county, I suppose. So, all right. Well, we'll see what happens, but so we hopefully have faith in the voting process tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All right. Hopefully everyone will get out and vote tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So, Louis, thanks so much.
Thank you. Everybody have a great week.
All right. You too. That's Louis Campbell on KSJE Farmington. Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.